Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in. This episode was recorded live in October, and it's part of a tradition that we've developed here on the pod, that we use it to reflect the year that has passed. We share recruitment and job market insights and give you a sneak peek on what's coming in the year ahead as well. Geoff Slade is one of Australia's most experienced and respected recruiters, with over 50 years in the industry as the executive chairman of Slade Group and the executive director of Transearch International Australia. Geoff has a wealth of knowledge about changing dynamics of the workforce, recruitment trends, and how professionals can best navigate their careers in a very competitive job market. So in this episode, we will be looking back at major changes that have shaped and transformed the job market in 2024 and what they mean for your career. We will also be making predictions for 2025, covering the skills, industries, and opportunities you should keep an eye on. Whether you're currently job seeking or considering a career change in the months ahead, or simply wanting to stay ahead of the curve, understand how recruiters think and their perspective on the job search, which is different from yours, this conversation will be packed with insights for you. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Geoff Slade. It's always a pleasure to talk to him, and I hope it helps you as much as it helps me. Stay tuned for his expert advice, his take on how 2024 was quite a unique year for his business, and his predictions to help you gear up for the year ahead. Yep, we're live on LinkedIn. Hello, LinkedIn. And we're live on YouTube as well. Hello, YouTube. So if you're on LinkedIn and you want to swap around to YouTube or vice versa, we're live on both platforms, everybody. I know many of you have been emailing me and messaging me saying that you're going to be participating. People tend to be very shy, Geoff, in the participation chat. Don't be. You can please send me your questions. I have lots of questions for Geoff, but it will be nice to see the commentary and what people think about what we're saying. I would be delighted to hear back from you. Last year, we had 800 people here on LinkedIn that watched this conversation and 200 on YouTube, so 1,000. And let's see if we can beat the record, Geoff. Your conversations are always very successful here on the podcast, and I thank you so much for always being available for a chat. And I like to get you towards the end of the year so that we can do a bit of a review and assess. And, you know, for those that are still not employed and looking for work, as we get closer to the holiday season, it gets more stressful and there's a sense of anxiety. And I want this session today to be, you know, hope for them and support for them in the months ahead and the year to come as well. Let's start by reflecting on 2024. How would you describe, Geoff, the market in 2024? Were there anything that was unexpected that took you by surprise, or was it just as you expected and we discussed at the end of last year?
Well, thank you for having me, Renata. I'm not sure that we didn't expect it, but I think I said last year that things were tough. And I think they remain tough, unfortunately. The cost of doing business has taken confidence out of the market in Australia. And that's created a lack of investment, and it means hiring freezes and probably even more so delays in decision making.
Yeah.
We're finding that companies are slow to make decisions. They're considering every option available to them before they make a decision. I think it reflects a change in priorities for Australian businesses. The key focus, I think, has changed, with profitability now perceived to be the number one issue, or the lack of it. And attracting and retaining talent has slipped to number 3. Year on year, job ads have fallen by 13%. But the quarter-on-quarter changes have flattened over the last 2 quarters. across most states and territories.
Mm.
So I think there is meaningful hope for 2025. Um, the year-on-year fall in labour demand was across all sectors, and in particular in professional services, which was down 15%. That saw the largest decline, primarily driven by continued decline in the ICT industry, which is down 23%.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
think that was unexpected, to be frank.
Mm.
That sort of
Yeah.
fall was very significant.
Yeah.
Um, but there was a partial offset by the growth in legal, plus 8%. Real estate and property experienced modest year-on-year growth of 1%. Other than ICT, notable declining industries were engineering minus 22, and mining resources and energy minus 19, advertising, arts and media minus 18.
Mm. Wow.
So since the pandemic, the sectors that have experienced the most demand and job growth have been community services and development, trades and services. So it pays to be a tradesperson these days.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare and medical, and retail and consumer products. We've seen really strong growth in job seekers wanting to work in the public sector during and following the pandemic. And I think the most surprising thing has been the demand for banking and ICT workers has declined, which we probably didn't expect either.
That's interesting. Do you have a reason for that? Do you know? I mean, you've mentioned some of that, but specifically about those two sectors, banking and ICT, do you think it's a reflection of the economy worldwide, or is it something to do with the Australian economy?
I think it's both.
Yeah, okay.
I think things like interest rates uh, have certainly been a local
Yeah.
situation. Um, I was in Switzerland about a month ago, visiting my son and his family, and interest rates there were at about 1% for buying vehicles and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
which is a huge difference between there and here. Um, the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, I think, have had an impact from a economic perspective.
Yes.
And of course, banking and those sectors are global businesses, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Geoff. I think I want to switch to talking about different types of work in the sense of where people work these days. We saw the pandemic um, bringing up more remote and flexibility in the workforce, hybrid work. And we've been discussing remote and hybrid work for a few years. I did a presentation for your team and your clients a month ago about this. And I wanted to get your views about what 2024 is telling us about how your clients, the employers, want to work with employees, and are these work models evolving? Are they embracing more remote opportunities, or are they asking for more people to come back into the office? What are their expectations?
The latter.
Mm, okay.
And I think there's a distinct difference here between their expectations and particularly Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
I attended a lunch the other day, which we put on with a whole lot of top level HR executives. One of the speakers there was a young woman from Melbourne University who uh, was. We were talking about generational differences in attitude and approach to work,
Mm-hmm.
and I think she blew most of the people around the table away with what Gen Z's views were of their expectations and how to manage them. More importantly,
Wow. Okay.
one of the things she said was, "We, being Gen Z, have no interest in people management opportunities."
Mm-hmm.
So I think the reality is that companies are going to have to learn to manage in different ways
Yeah.
if they're going to make the most out of that sort of attitude from young people coming through.
Mm-hmm.
We're finding still that there's a huge variation between sectors and job families, but one of the most striking differences is that more junior and younger employees are being asked to return to the office at least 3 days a week. Um, and a lot of the research that's coming that I'm seeing is indicating that the most productive offices, and productivity is in the end what it's all about, are those that are working 4 days a week in office and 1 day a week from home.
Mm.
So there will continue, I think, to be pressure from employers to go to that sort of model, if not 5 days a week.
Yes. Yes. I I spoke about it with a group of your clients, and then I did a podcast about it when Amazon announced that they were bringing their employees back to the office full time. And then after that, I listened to a podcast, a show by TED Talks, and it's called Fixable. And these two Harvard academics were saying that three people do not like to come back full time to the office: the high performing individuals, the women, and the millennials. I mean, Gen Zs are not in the job market as much, so they were talking about millennials. So if Amazon implements, which they say they will, from January 2025 onwards, you have to be in the office full time according to their new policy. They might score low in their diversity and inclusion or in their gender scores because people might decide to move away from Amazon if they can afford to, especially the high performing ones. They might go somewhere else. And if to keep the high performing, the women and the millennials, they start to open exceptions, then the Amazon culture might suffer because those exceptions never go down well with other people.
No.
So I thought that was a very interesting take on the situation.
One of the things we see, particularly with more mature employees, is that they are agreeing in principle to mandates to come back to the office,
Mm,
but they're not filling their in office commitments or fulfilling. Uh, and there's still little enforcement happening in Australia.
mm,
I've
yeah,
even found that in my own business here that
yeah,
there that some people commit to 3 or 4 days a week, others but still come in 2 days a week.
right, right,
And I
yeah.
think with high performing individuals, employers are reluctant to try and enforce that more stringently.
Right. Are there room for negotiations when people are offered opportunities and they want to ask for more flexibility? Do you know if employers are okay in maybe negotiating that at the tail end of a process?
I think they are, but it depends on your performance.
Hmm.
If you're under budget,
Yeah.
it's pretty hard to negotiate why you should continue to operate the way you have been.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, the other thing that has been top of mind for my clients and listeners, Geoff, is technology, right? 2024 is the first year where we have seen AI really take over, and more people use AI tools to help them and support them in their job search. And I also find that my clients who are usually more senior, they're experienced professionals, they're managers, they're executives, they're gobsmacked that they need to apply for jobs in very um, and processes that are not very humane, let's call it that. They're quite surprised that they're not talking to anyone until further down the track, and they're not used to it because they're not. They always thought that those sort of types of recruitment processes were for younger people. So I just had a discussion like that with my group coaching um, clients just this morning about it. So I'm really keen to talk to you about those technologies, and have you seen a big difference in the way that people are applying for jobs using AI? What are the sort of tools and and innovations that you have seen, both from the recruitment perspective and the candidates' perspective in recruitment and selection of candidates?
Well, it's funny you should ask that question because I've just finished a meeting half an hour ago with a company out of India
Mm.
who are basically, in many respects, consolidating uh, a lot of these processes. They've got 3,000 employees in India and
Wow.
they're operating globally, particularly in America and England, but now more so in Australia. They've got 50 employees in Australia. And everything from talent identification to approaching them, almost let's say a 270 to 300 degree application sort of process or applicant tracking process. In some cases, talking to the potential candidates before they ever get to the recruitment agency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's issues around. Uh, I think that, well, firstly, I think that the AI technology has great potential from a productivity point of view uh, in terms of hiring processes. But there's a real risk that all job adverts and PDs start looking and sounding the same
Mm.
if they become over reliant on Chat GPT.
Yeah.
We had a situation this week. Uh, Anita, my wife, is handling a very senior role, and she had two applications uh, for the same job from two people, and the applications were absolutely identical.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but
No,
that
I
can
hadn't either.
happen. Yeah. I can
So,
see how it would happen.
and it's pretty hard to differentiate yourself if you're using AI to that extent, or you're not
Yes,
using it as well as you could be.
that's right. It's all about how you prompt the AI to give
Yeah,
you a more tailored output. That's
and this
so
was
interesting.
this is a $400,000 job.
Yes.
So it's interesting that that sort of thing is happening. I could probably see it happening more in what we would call mid-level jobs, middle-level
Hmm.
management. But very senior levels like that, we were a bit surprised, I must say.
Okay. Okay.
And I think that for candidates, there's a danger that CVs and interview answers become very generic
Hmm.
and therefore unimpressive, rather than the candidate's own experience and authentic voice.
Mm. Yeah. That's starting to happen already. I can see
So
that with my client
we
work.
need to be wary.
Hmm.
Candidates need to be wary too
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
just how it's used.
Mm. How is the how are you matching the candidates now with the jobs that are advertised? I'm thinking about that whole technology and the challenge in recruitment when they are maybe using ChatGPT or other AI tools to upload their resume and their cover letters because of their lack of confidence in presenting themselves, but they are actually quite good at what they do, because these are two different things. One thing is to, do the job, and the other one is to apply for the job. Do you see, that everything becoming so vanilla? How are you finding individuals? Do you have to take extra steps to identify the good ones, since everything is becoming a little bit more vanilla?
Well, I think we have to train our own people, the consultants, if you like,
Mm-hmm.
to be, as I said, more wary of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think we, as consultants, have to be more specific with our clients about what it is they're really looking for.
Yeah.
I think there's been a tendency in our industry to So even when putting together a position description or working with a client to identify what they really need,
Mm-hmm.
to not be nuanced enough. Uh, and I think we need, not many clients are very experienced at really understanding their own needs.
Yes.
And I think we have to be much more helpful in doing that with them and really getting to understand what they want
Mm.
out of an individual and out of the experience of the individual.
Yeah. It's almost like a different consultancy, isn't it? To
It
actually
almost
help
is.
them with the
Yeah,
position description and the job design. That's
yeah.
interesting.
We had a situation the other day, a week or two ago, where we're doing a country general manager's job for a client in Sydney, and the consultant handling the job wrote a PD, which, on reflection, I think was too vanilla. And the
Mm.
client rightly said, "I expect more than this. I expect you to really understand what it is we are looking for this job,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs more than just a vanilla response."
Yeah. Yeah. I have had situations where clients, well, me personally, and clients of mine, where we gave feedback about the position description and then they changed it.
Yeah.
They would say, okay, we think we want you to apply for this role. And then a client would say, well, it doesn't seem like the right role for me.
Mm.
And the person would say, no, you are the sort of candidate we want. What's wrong with the PG?
Yeah.
And then the candidate will say, well, that's not what I do. What I do is X, not Y. And they changed the PG.
Well, Renato, one of the things that I try to emphasize with our own people
Hmm.
is that we have to be curious.
Good point. Yeah.
Just taking the PD as a given without being questioning,
Hmm.
without saying, well, what is it you're really looking for? It's a bit like at the other end of the spectrum. I try to insist with our consultants that they put themselves on the line when they actually put together a shortlist. Don't
Mm.
just refer, the candidate and this is what I'm shortlisting them for you because they've got the right experience because that's what's in the CV.
Yeah.
What is it in your gut that tells you this is the right sort of person for this company?
Hmm.
That's why I think I've had a lot of success over the years with saying to clients, look, this person doesn't meet the PD that you've put together, but I actually
Hmm.
think they're better than the people who do meet that criteria that we've identified.
Yes. Good point.
Yeah.
Mm. Before we move on to predictions for next year, I have one more question for you about this recruitment and hiring practices. I've noticed as a coach this growing trend of including assessments as part of the recruitment process for my clients who are experienced professionals looking for senior roles.
You mean
Just
psychological assessments?
everything. So this morning in the group coaching, there was a person who was going through a process that includes a conversation with a psychologist, followed by a personality test, followed by a um, a test that includes math skills, oral, and something else, like a really comprehensive assessment
Yeah.
protocol. That is not uncommon in my sort of with my clientele. These are clients looking for C-level roles, managing director roles, and I have a client that spent 2 days doing assessments and didn't get the job. And I was, telling her that it's a good experience. Go for it. Practice for the maths and the oral, those sort of verbal skills. But there's nothing really you can do in terms of practicing for the personality tests. Um, what do you think of that as a way of getting to know the candidate better? Do you think it's a valuable waste of time and money for everybody? Because it's a big investment for the recruitment firms and it's a big investment of time as well for the candidates to do it.
Uh, well, I think we're probably going through a cycle. For many years in my history, most companies would not hire anybody without putting them through that testing.
Mm-hmm.
That's dropped off in the last 10 or 15 years quite considerably. It's starting to pick up again, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the issues, though, I'm referring to the woman that you just mentioned. I've got no idea who it is, obviously, or what job she was looking for. But I don't think because you do the testing, you should automatically expect that you're going to get the job either,
Mm-hmm.
even though you may feel that you've tested very well. Because I think the reality is that testing can um, vary what the client thinks they're really looking for.
Mm-hmm.
They can provide them with a different perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and they might also, it is a way, I think, of sorting out uh, just what the client is looking for. And in some cases, I also think that it can be overkill because the client takes too much notice of the test and not what they thought in the initial interview or the second interview about the person themselves.
Yeah.
So, there's no right or wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but I think clients are starting to utilize everything at their disposal
Yeah.
because they can't afford to get it wrong. It's a very expensive process,
Yeah.
particularly for the sort of jobs you're talking about.
I think there is an issue with more experienced professionals that they may not have been assessed in that sort of time constrained environment. If you're younger and you've done an MBA or master's programs and you set for exams, you're more used to that sort of situation. Whereas if you're older, you might struggle a bit. So prepping for those tests and practicing for them is really important because it
It
may
is.
have been years since you've done any maths in that way.
And they need to
Uh,
be prepped properly
yeah,
by the recruitment company
yeah, yeah.
because a lot of them enter into that sort of situation without knowing that's coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as part of the program that I run, I make sure that people understand that it's really up to them to go and research and practice for those tests with the expectation, with the assumption that you will have to do it towards
Yeah.
the end of the program. The other trend that I've experienced, Jeff, is references being contacted way before the end of the process when there are three or four candidates still running for the role. Is that a practice that the Slade Group is doing as well?
Normally, no.
Okay. Why do you think that's the
But we
case?
wouldn't,
Because
normally we wouldn't do it. But if the
mm,
client requests it and the candidate is happy to do it,
mm.
we would do it. But normally it's done at the end of the process.
Do you think a candidate can ask the recruiter to, if possible, postpone the conversation with a reference, or is that dictated by the client? I
No,
say this because if you have gone through two or three situations where your referees were contacted and you didn't get the job, it starts to become a bit awkward for the candidate.
it does. I
Mm,
think they can ask for it to be postponed.
okay.
That not doesn't necessarily mean that agreement will follow, but you know,
Yeah.
I actually think it's a bit of an imposition on the
Yeah.
candidate
Yes.
and can end up in the wrong result anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed that it is happening more often. So I really appreciate you saying that because it gives people that are listening a bit more control over, the situation. Um, and if the referees haven't been in the job market, they may not know that that's the case, that, that they will be contacted halfway through the process and not at the tail end. And I think it's
Well, I
important
think
for
the
them
big
to know.
worry, Renata, is that quite often the client wants to do the reference without allowing the candidate to ask permission from the referee as to whether or not
Oh,
they're happy to take a call.
Can they do that?
Well, legally, there's nothing stopping them doing it, but we would indicate to the client that it's not kosher really to do such a thing.
Uh-huh.
But there are plenty of clients around who will do it anyway, and that's a concern.
Yes. Yeah. We have somebody here saying that they asked to defer the reference checks
Yeah,
and that was okay. They were granted
yeah.
that request. So that's good to know that some employers are okay with
I
you
think I think
taking more control.
what you're talking about here, to an extent,
Hmm.
is the word control. I think candidates have to be fairly firm in what they're prepared to allow and or not prepared to allow in terms of um, checks and things that uh, take place during the process.
Mm.
I try to train my people to take control of the environment when they're doing an interview, or when they're doing a client visit to pick up a job,
Hmm.
because otherwise there's a tendency to go off the rails. Um, but the candidates equally have to be um, prepared to stand up for themselves
Yes, yes, yes. And not be afraid
in
of
a nice way.
burning bridges. Yeah.
To say, Mr. Client, I'm sorry, but at this point, I'm not prepared to give you permission to talk to my referees.
Hmm.
I'm happy to do that at the end of the process when you feel comfortable that you think I'm a serious candidate for the job, uh, or when I feel seriously interested in the job. But at this point, I'm not prepared to give you permission to do that.
I like the wording. I hope that she's listening so she can use the exact wording you just did.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's talk about 2025. How is Slade preparing for the next year?
Well, with a glimmer of hope. This is,
Okay.
I reckon, this is the toughest year we've had. I've been in this business for 58 years,
Wow. Okay.
and I think this is the toughest year we've had since 1974.
Wow. I was 2 years old in 74.
I wish I had been. Um, but I just, the lack of confidence in the market has been uh, very evident.
Uh-huh.
All of the big recruitment firms, the publicly listed firms, are way down in terms of revenue and profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And so are the smaller firms like ours, or the medium firms. Um, and but I've seen in the last 6 weeks, say, that the market is starting to free up a bit,
Okay.
and hopefully that will continue into 2025.
Mm-hmm.
I think the political climate, both internationally and domestically, and with a federal election due, probably isn't great for job seekers. And of course, the economy is constrained by high interest rates and inflation being stubbornly high. But I'm even seeing green shoots there. I
Mm-hmm.
think the inflation rate has dropped significantly in the last few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. We would expect growth in the public sector to slow. I think there's a rebound happening in ICT,
Good.
and I think there's continued growth in community healthcare and trades. Not sure how the banking and finance sector will come back, but hopefully it will. Um, I think there are people who are better qualified than me to comment on technology skills, but I still see the keys to success being relationships, focus, and productivity.
Mm.
And I think candidates, when they're applying for jobs or in the middle of interviews, need to be able to focus on those three things. You know, where can I add value to you, the client?
Mm.
Um, what are my communication and presentation skills like? I have to be able to engage with the person who's interviewing me.
Hmm.
And if I can't do that, the chances of me getting the job are probably pretty slim.
Yeah. Do you see your teams at Slade and Transearch and whatnot using LinkedIn to kind of identify those hallmarks for the candidates through their profile and activity? Do you think that that is important as a way of choosing the right candidates? Or is it more the job application and the conversations? I'm just trying to see how much LinkedIn, especially at the as a precursor of the job application, is important for recruiters.
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, because that's what I've been telling everyone. So thank you.
I think, a couple of other points I'd make is if you're
Mm,
employed, take every advantage of job mentoring, job shadowing, mentoring, rotations, and other internal mobility opportunities.
right.
I think it's one of the best ways to prove you're ready for the next steps in your career. As a job seeker, do your research. Far too many candidates turn up and they've never even looked at the website of the potential client if they happen to know it.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure that even after being told who the company is, that they do their research as well as they might.
Yes.
Be conscious of the business climate and the change focus for business, with profitability being the chief concern. You need to have a feel or an understanding of how the company you're talking to is going.
Mm,
You know, these are the sorts of questions that you need to be asking of the person doing the interview. Is this
yeah.
company doing well in the market? Is it got the potential to do well? Will it survive? Because there's no doubt in my mind that this is a market where there are lots of companies going out of business.
Hmm.
And it's not much fun for you to join a new company and 6 months later they no longer exist or they can't afford to keep you.
Yes. You know,
The decision is
sometimes,
very important for you as much as it is for the client.
yeah. Sometimes people come to me and I tell them the importance of doing all that preparation and that research, and they're quite surprised and feel like it's a lot of work for potentially little chance of getting the job. And the test that I ask them to do is this: if you're not interested in this organization, why would you want to work there?
Exactly.
Right? So if you don't have the passion and the interest to be curious and do the research and read the news about it and go on the website and download their annual reports, then you're not ready for a senior executive role at this organization. Maybe you don't want this anymore. Let's go back to the drawing board
Yeah,
and think about your next steps in your career.
I'd agree completely.
Okay.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
advice.
The point is not really getting the job. Yes, at the beginning of the process, your chances are 10, 20%. If there are, five other candidates, it's a 20% chance, right? But for your own professional development and understanding of the sector you're interested in, your industry, the companies that are in that sector, that research will never be wasted time. And if you feel like it is a waste of time, then we need to go back to the drawing board.
Sure.
We need to, yeah. Okay. I see it that way as well. And it's okay to want something else for your career. And if you're listening and you have that sentiment, don't worry about it. There's no right or wrong. We just need to know how you're going to live out, the next decade of your career. What do you want really to do? What are your expectations in terms of job opportunities? And we can do something different. We
I
don't
think
need
you,
to do the
you
same
also
thing.
need to do some homework about the industries that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Do they have growth potential?
Hmm.
If you looked at industries that were growing 20, 30, 40 years ago,
Yeah.
most of them are nowhere near the top these days.
Mm.
As we've
Last,
become more and more a service economy,
yeah.
you
Do
know,
you think that that's the future for Australia? A service economy focused on health and professional services, bit of mining. Is that how you see
yeah,
executives focusing their energies into? Yeah.
yeah. Now, if you've only got experience in manufacturing,
Mm.
the chances of you moving into the service economy are pretty slim. But for young
Yeah.
people who are looking for, people in their 20s and early 30s, perhaps, before they're well established in their experience and career, they should be looking at industries that have real growth potential.
Hmm.
I don't think even 5 years ago we would have seen the opportunities that exist now in healthcare that exist today.
True. Yeah. It's huge, isn't it?
It is,
Mm.
and not just in Australia.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably we have labour shortages in the healthcare industry that would match anyone in the world.
Yeah.
So if you're well placed and have a background in healthcare or the opportunity to move into healthcare, I
Hmm.
think for the next 20 years or so at least, there are lots of job opportunities there.
Do you have good examples of job candidates that have been successful at making those difficult transitions into healthcare, for example, from a different area that you can sort of share with us? What was it about their
Well, for instance,
performance that made them successful?
uh, I don't think, for instance, you need to have been a CFO in healthcare in order to get a job in healthcare
Hmm.
or a marketing director. Certainly, there are jobs where if you haven't worked in them previously in healthcare, you're not going to get one.
Mm.
You're not going to suddenly become a nurse.
Sure.
But there are lots of jobs that exist in other industries where you could aspire to get into an industry like healthcare, which is growing.
Yeah. And because they have more demand, they're also more open for those industry transitions,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
and I
Good
think
point.
even it's interesting. I read an article in Shortlist, which is the recruitment industry's go-to newsletter, the other day, maybe
Mm.
3 or 4 weeks ago, that said recruitment companies are now opening up their minds to senior management who've come from other industries, which has never been the case.
Hmm. And why do you think that's happening in the recruitment industry?
Well, because I think there's too few
Really? Okay.
too few quality managers in our industry that exist. And secondly, I think people are recognising that those candidates without industry experience can bring a whole new perspective.
Mm. Yeah. It will be interesting to see the outcome of what you said about the generation Z not wanting leadership opportunities
Mm.
when it comes to finding future leaders for industries like recruitment.
Well, I think it's going to end up being a big gap in either the industry has to adapt
Yes.
or we have to build jobs that are going to be
Yeah.
of interest to those people.
Mm. We need to give the jobs to the generation X and then millennials and then skip a generation and hopefully the next one
Possibly.
will want leadership positions. But it's true. I have a client in the US from last year, and she was offered a job. She was really excited. She is excited about the role she has. And in her onboarding in this new organization, she was given the option of two tracks: a leadership track or a professional expert track. And she chose the professional expert track. She doesn't want leadership roles.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting that from the get-go they were already identifying, future opportunities for her.
I think, Renata, that having been in people management roles all my career,
Hmm.
I can understand that point of view.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Managing people is not easy.
Mm.
And as the world is changing and people becoming, taking much greater ownership of their careers,
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to understand that view.
Yes. It's one of the things I miss the most is, working with people and managing people.
Is it?
Working, yes, I do. I have that in me. I really miss having a group and a team and delegating, escalating,
Yeah.
being part of that sort of structure is something that working by myself now I really do miss.
Well,
But you're right. Once you have a leader,
perhaps you need to start a business that's at the moment
I
your business at the moment is focused on senior professionals and
I
management.
know.
Perhaps you need one for Gen Zs.
I know. I need to talk to you about that. You're great at this, expanding businesses. No, but I think, one of the things that people doesn't really get it is that the career ambition to go up and up in the corporate ladder means usually, dedicating more and more time to people issues. And
Mm.
if you're not interested in that, then that will be a problem for you.
Yeah,
'Cause you can't really delegate those things when you're at that level. You have to take that is your responsibility.
and you have to
And
make decisions.
you do. Yeah, yeah. So we have a question here. Is there advice on creating opportunities by job seekers in a flat and vanilla environment? Is there advice on creating opportunities for job seekers in a flat and vanilla environment? I don't know that I understand the question though. Geoff, do you?
Um, sort of.
Mm,
I think whether it's a flat or vanilla environment or not,
mm,
I think you can create job opportunities, but you have to do your homework.
yeah.
You have to identify the industries that you would like to be involved in. You have to identify the companies in those industries that are exhibiting growth potential or real growth.
Mm,
You have to be prepared to approach those companies, perhaps even to the CEO. I mean, let's face it, if you can get a CEO interested in your background, even if you're then referred to the HR person
mm-hmm,
somewhere down the line, if the CEO says to the HR person, this individual looks interesting, can you interview them as a first step? It may just create an opportunity,
yeah.
but you have to be prepared to do that homework. And my
Mm,
observation is that not many people are.
mm. I
You
actually,
have to
as a
think. You have
mm,
to think laterally
yes, yes.
about where your background might fit in.
I I always at the end of the year like to have episodes to support people that are, feeling anxious about not having a job at the end of the year. I think it's a great sort of personal issue for me because I have been in that situation. Not having a job at the end of the year is really triggering. I think for some people, it used to be triggering for me. You don't want to go and have conversations with your family and in friends, in a social setting, in a Christmas party, and not have a job. It's hard to know what to say and to provide, an update when you're not happy with your update. I've been in that situation more than once, so I do relate to that. But having said that, for those listening, I think it's a really good time of the year to be disciplined and have and continue to network and not fall off the wagon during this time. Because what I have learned from my personal experience in my clients is that if you are disciplined and you continue to nurture your relationships, engage on LinkedIn, have your coffees, be confident and comfortable with what you're saying to people when you have those catch ups and be on listening mode, a lot of good things can happen in the new year because you've managed to nurture those relationships and keep top of mind of people, send them Christmas emails to the recruiters that have helped you throughout the year, even if you didn't get a job. All of these things I think are really great. And by the time this episode goes out, I will have already released episode 264, which is a survival guide for the end of the year if you're unemployed. So
Mhm.
listen to that. That might be beneficial. And then we have this episode with Geoff that we're recording live here on LinkedIn, on YouTube on the 17th of October, and we're releasing it at the beginning of December to help anybody that is still looking for work in 2025 or will start to look for work in 2025. Geoff, I think of all of the things you said, I think the most important for those that are looking for work to hear is that this has been a tough year for you and for recruiters, because people do not have that sense of perspective. If they're looking for work now and they haven't looked for work before, this is all they know. And it's looking so difficult, and they, have the sense, oh, is this always difficult like this? And it's not. It's been more difficult now than it has been in a long time.
Significantly more difficult.
There you go.
I mean, when I said to you that I thought it was the most difficult year we've had since 1974, that includes the recession, the mining end of the mining boom in the late 80s. It includes the financial crash in the early 2000s, or 2009, 8 or 9, 10. It's been tough.
Yeah.
They shouldn't lose hope.
No, I think the advice here is to, focus on bootstrapping, understanding that this is a socioeconomic issue that is outside of our control. But with all things to do with economics, it's, ups and downs. And there's every chance that 2027 will be much better than 2024. I do have hope after the American election and things unfolding after that. Whichever way it goes, it's better than the situation we have now.
I hope you're right.
I hope so too. All right, my friend, thank you so much for once again doing this with me. Can we lock in next year?
Sure.
I want you back. Okay.
I'm getting to the age where I might not be around next year, Renata, but you never know.
Oh, forget that. Of course you will be around, and I'll see you next year for another take on 2025, 2026.
And you enjoy your trip.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Geoff. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for participating, and keep the comments going. I'll be checking them this afternoon and answering any questions that you may have thought of and we hadn't addressed it here. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.